Hello again, Design Street. This is Rachel Hopkins. This is part 2 of my video walkthrough of our 10-year celebration student art show here in April 2023. So we're celebrating 10 years with some current student artwork on display that we have done this year, as well as a look back at some of the work we've done in the past. I was just telling you about artworks that students have brought in, inspired by ancient cultures, inspired by European cultures, inspired by America. I just wanted to point out that not only do we have student work around the room, but instructor work as well. So we have artwork from instructors that have taught workshops here, such as Julie Keckley with this beautiful canvas painting that happens to look a lot like a quilt. And then I have some of my own artwork on display. These were Matryoshka dolls inspired by Russia and our unit of international folk art. The students that year did their version of these very traditional classic Russian stacking dolls, or babushka dolls as they're often referred to as. They did their version on canvas. Some more artwork. I have artwork here on display from a former student of mine from Kendall College of Art and Design, where I have also taught classes. So this is some of her work and some of my own again. So just wanted to give you a glance around the room at everything that you're seeing here on the screens. More of my own collection, more of my Matryoshka dolls, and even a little Japanese kokeshi doll, which was inspired by ancient Japan. And this one was done with paper mache, mixed media. I have a little recycled, repurposed trash can that I could decoupage for her little body. Love how that turned out. So you can kind of see an assortment of things, even tumbling tricycles attached from the ceiling. And umbrellas. Again, I love culture. I love looking at cultures from around the world, at how inspiring the elements of art when done in arrangements from different cultures, perspectives, environments, experiences. Of course, our elements being line, shape, form, texture, color, space. And then the arrangement of those is how we create design and form and function with things like movement and balance and rhythm and harmony, contrast. So fun things. Here is an example of a whole lot of examples, I should say, from our advanced class. In the fall, we started with a drawing class. So these are students that have been with us for a while, several years, and are ready to kind of approach their artwork from more of a college sensibility. And so I will instruct some of the same projects that I would teach at the colleges that I've worked for. And I only have these students once a week for a couple hours, so we can't do the full extent of a college semester, but we do some of the major points that we might cover in a basic drawing course. And those would include contour drawing, sketching, everything from life. We went outside to do some work. We went over value, rendering, and composition, texture, of course, contrast in values. And then this spring, we have been focusing on color and color mixing, color theory. So of course we're working with understanding triadic color, so the primaries and secondaries, color mixing. This was a study where we mixed complementary colors to get a series of grays, warm grays or cool grays. And then I did an assignment with the students where we had to put the principles of abstraction to practice in a realistic image. In this case, the student chose a koala bear, photograph of a koala bear that she interpreted in 4 different abstract principles. One being essential shapes, so reducing the realistic image to just basic shapes. Here's another one with transparency, where you can see shapes to another. This one's what we call spontaneous response. You kind of create your own interpretation of the image. This one's what we call fragmentation, so separating basic shapes and reduction of color. Another drawing. Okay, so that's our advanced class. This is kind of fun. It's not student work, but it is a sampling of our schedule book covers that we have designed over the years. My husband, Adam Hopkins, puts a lot of time into our layout and design of schedule books. We used to do a lot more of these before the big shutdown and pandemic, when we went to, for the most part, online digital forms of our schedules. But I miss these days where we had a lot of paper versions. These were all posters that we printed out of the covers of our schedule books that I would put in the window and use for promotion and advertising in various places. So these were used with vintage images, public domain images that you can utilize, and then we would make them kind of our own. We would change things around, add color. A lot of these are images that I created for my own illustration portfolio. But a lot of fun. I believe this was our first one. One of our first ones. Our very first one was back in 2013, but this was fall 2015. So just kind of a fun variety of interpretive images for our covers for fall, summer, and spring schedule books. Then we have, again, some retrospect work here with our clay garden. That was actually during the pandemic, the shutdown. We still had classes going on here in person, and the students started out that year creating a little clay garden inspired by, I think, America that year. This one was American Gothic, Grant Wood's piece that we did in clay. So layers of clay with Miss Lacey Schmidt as the instructor. That was such a fun unit. Students really got to work with clay in a whole different way, illustrative way. And then these pieces that were cut from layers of cardstock, and then we used tea lights in between the layers so that they would light up. That was done this year, inspired by Germany and some of the folk art in the Black Forest of Germany. So earlier I misspoke when I said the Vienna Recession. I meant the Vienna Secession, where artists kind of took off, had a little rebellion against the establishment. This movement was really led by Gustav Klimt and his art colleagues and contemporaries. But this unit was really inspired by his gorgeous use of gold leaf and figure work. And so in this case, the student used metal repose I mentioned earlier was thin metal that you could etch in or press into. To create really interesting designs, and then gold paint. And then we have our middle school, high school version of the London project. I mentioned earlier our younger students. So the middle school, high school students were doing kind of a one-point perspective with some surreal aspects, playing around with proportion, changing sizes and shapes of things. And then some had the time to paint theirs with a watercolor wash. Each unit again focuses on some aspect of color, and in this case color mixing of neutrals by using complementary colors, so in this case red and green, to create warm grays. So I've got some of those, and then some more of these beautiful Vienna inspired, Gustav Klimt inspired portraits. Students had to combine these vintage photograph pieces, so not the entire photograph, but parts of a photograph, into a composition with their Deco-inspired shapes and renderings with the gold. Another London piece. Well done, well rendered. Students have a variety of experiences and levels of skill here. Some are very new to art, some have been with us for many years. More examples of those Gustav Klimt inspired gold portraits. I love this interpretation of the one-point London perspective. This has kind of an album cover vibe, kind of a surreal look to it, which is really fun, something maybe out of the 60s or 70s, all out of our students' imagination. I do have a piece here that I was able to mount kind of last minute. Students are working currently on their pieces inspired by France. So some of these I was able to mount up for the show in oil pastel. Of course, another piece inspired by the Netherlands. And then I wanted to kind of step back a little and point you towards the ceiling. I have to get creative when it comes to displaying artwork because we have so much to display. We have right around 100 students this year in our programs, including around 20 virtual students that are working from home with our recorded tutorials and our assembled art kits of supplies. So in the middle of the room, we pulled all of our art tables, so it looks very different when you come here for class. We have tables all set up for the students. Some are drawing tables, some are different tables. But we pulled these together, and Miss Lacey set up a display of our Spain-inspired bowl series. So for our younger ones, I mentioned before, we were inspired by Pablo Picasso and his abstract cubism. He did a series of drawings of a bowl. The students designed their own bowl, and I helped cut those out with an X-Acto knife because these are our younger students. Our middle school, high school age students also did an abstract bowl, but theirs was done with clay. Now this is an oil-based clay, a plasticine is what it's called. And it is colored clay, so they didn't have to paint this. It will never like fully dry. It gets very hard, but never 100% completely dry because it is made with oil and therefore cannot be painted. So we kind of skip the painted process, which takes time, and we go right to the colored clay. This is a great clay. You can work on it from week to week and it won't dry out. This particular bowl was inspired by ramen. You can see there the ramen bowl. There's even an egg, a fried egg for his horns. I love that. The little chives, the noodles, so fun. I love this creative take and interpretation of the bowl. The students get the experience of creating their own wire armature on a wooden base. And then of course, adding the layers of clay. Lacey Schmidt, their instructor, will walk them through that process. The instructors here will create the piece of art first in their own example so that they know the full process and how long it will take, what supplies are included, and then we can better instruct the students on how to proceed through the unit. Some of the students had a little extra time, were able to decorate their base. I love that. But each are kind of their own unique take. This one looks like he's coming out of the mud. So interesting. So you've got all sorts of interpretation, many different moods, tones, styles, and then of course these, which I really love, these foam core bowls done with oil pastel. Students walked through a series of progressive illustrations and studies, applying principles of abstraction to a photo of a bowl. So I'll show you a little bit more of that in just a minute. Just want to walk you around the room and just get a glimpse of some of these creative solutions for these bowls. I was really, really pleased. You can see the proportions are all totally different. Colors are different. They had to work with a color palette. So these are purposely non-representational. They are purposely abstract. Really kind of interesting. This reminds me of a series of cows that were popular years back in Chicago and New York, various urban areas around the country that were on display, and they were painted vibrantly in different colors. This just kind of reminds me of those. All right, a few more of our London street scenes that the students did. They had to mix their wash. So they were given a full sheet of poster board, and they had to mix red and green and get a neutral brown gray, we call a warm gray, and then they painted that on their poster board, let it dry. That's why all these kind of have a slightly different color. based on if they use more green or more red. And then we walked through each drawing of kind of a landmark building, like Big Ben, Parliament, some federal buildings, apartment buildings. There's a lamp post. Everybody did a double-decker bus, just to kind of experience London-style architecture. They each drew them. So that's why all the proportions are very similar, because it was important to understand proportion. But detail-wise, they got to kind of do some of their own interpretations and style on them. Love it. The cuckoo clocks I mentioned earlier are inspired by the Black Hills of Germany. That's southern Germany. And they're folk art. They're very traditional folk art. Students watched a short video on the tradition of the handmade wooden cuckoo clock, which is still very popular today. They designed theirs on 7 different pieces of foam core, which we then glued up and layered. And then they took home a clock kit with a little back, kind of a clock attachment on the back for a battery, and then they affixed their hands on the front. Some of the students had success with that, some didn't. I know my own sample was very, very challenging to get the hands to stay on and collaborate, or get them to work together, but I applaud their attempt at that. I told them, sadly, I was not much help because I'm not a clock creator, clock maker myself, but we all gave it a shot, and some of them told me they worked just great. They got the hands to sync up, and they keep great time, apparently, but that's okay. The idea was to create their own interpretation of these cuckoo clocks, and I just love these, even the little weights at the bottom. More examples of the Vienna-inspired portraits. These are self-portraits. So the students worked on learning the canon of proportions, which is inspired by ancient Greece, of course, and proper symmetrical proportion in faces. And then they were given photographs. The parents sent me a photo, and I printed them out. And the students got to tweak their proportionate self-portrait to add all their personal details, like glasses, different style of hair, different shaped noses, mouths, eyebrows, different colors of skin and hair and eyes, and they did a fabulous job. The clothing, you can see, has been reduced or abstracted to shapes of color, very much like Gustav Klimt did in his work. And then, of course, we added the golden shapes in the background with gold paper. More cuckoo clocks. All right, you're gonna see just a few more. Like I said, I tried to get everyone represented here in their work. I also kind of walked the students through how they might draw the Fab Four, better known as the Beatles, and how they might draw the Queen of England if she were a bus driver or a bus passenger. So we kind of had some different interpretations of very well-known British citizens. More cuckoo clocks. Portraits. We have more up here on this wall. Both portraits and a few more of our Dutch inspired pieces. We have a few more of our bowls. Because we had a lot of bowls, we kind of have them in various spots around the room. We had live music last night from Ethan Smith, a guitar player, local guitar player. Lots to look at. This room is full of things to look at on the ceiling, on the floor, on the walls. Lots to look at, lots to see. Many times people will come into the studio and say, every time I'm here, I see something different. One of the last things I just want to highlight on this video tour of our student show, just again, how proud I am of the students. Some of them are very young. Like I said, in person, ages 7 to 11, virtual, 5 to 11. And middle school, high school students can be here in person or virtually. But all of our students kind of got to experience the principles of abstraction. I have a little note here if you're able to read that on the creative process, how we are really working to build future designers, people who are responding to a variety of stimulus or stimuli in their own creative way, informed by their own experiences, feelings, opinions, thoughts. These were, again, ways to abstract reality, in this case a photo of a bowl, with the reduction to essential shapes and colors. Fragmentation, that means none of the shapes connect, and in this case they had to use geometric shapes and warm colors or cool colors. Amplified exaggeration proportion, this is kind of how they built their design for their final piece with the foam core. And then spontaneous response, which we got a lot of different solutions on. Okay. So this was kind of the comp phase or the sketch phase. So even our youngest students are working like illustrators and designers. This was realistic proportion done with a grid. They had to trace a square and attempt to get their proportions more accurate in their square. Then they walked through how to abstract eyes in a variety of manners, noses and ears. Then they had to kind of do a sketch of their abstract version, again using the square or grid method. And then, as I mentioned earlier, before they did their Vienna-inspired portraits, they got to practice the canon of proportion, an ancient Greek approach to symmetry in their own faces. Then this last unit, this is an example with our younger students. They were practicing pointillism and the artist Georges Seurat as an inspiration. And rather than just having the students practice this optical color mixing using their little Q-tips and paint in just squares, we first drew out the Eiffel Tower because they were like, are we going to draw the Eiffel Tower? Even though we weren't focused on Paris, we're focused on the south of France. We did that, and then we filled in different parts of the Eiffel Tower with our color mixing optically. Well, thank you so much for walking through this tour with me. I have had so much fun looking back over 10 years of art, 10 years of creativity with students, some of which were not even born 10 years ago when we started this endeavor and began offering our programs here in Plainwell. But some of these students have been here 5-6 years and they're barely middle school age, which means half their life or more they've been with us. And it's very humbling and very gratifying to be able to watch these young artists progress and mature and grow in their confidence and their talents and abilities. And we hope, if nothing else, that an appreciation of art and an appreciation for technical ability and skill will be something that they have their whole life. And again, it's been my pleasure, and of course, Lacey's as well, Lacey Schmidt, our instructor, middle school, high school students. It's been our pleasure to be able to work with these students this year and in previous years and in years to come. Thank you so much, and we hope that you continue to follow us and watch what our students are working on. Have a great summer.